In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, welcome to another session of Finding God. We are still on chapter 53, which is the story of Joseph, or Yusuf, as we say. And last week I covered from verse 1 till verse 34. Today I'll take from verse 35 till verse 67. And then the week after, or next Friday, so to speak, I'll be finishing it off. So verse 68 till 111. And as mentioned last week, this is one of the very few chapters in the Quran where the whole story is compiled in one chapter. Otherwise, in the Quran, the rhetorical device is such that some parts are sprinkled here, some parts are sprinkled there. But here, the whole story is told as it is. And I think last time I went down a rabbit hole for a minute with regards to human behavior. Because human behavior then of Joseph and his employer's wife, who molested him, is not dissimilar to the Me Too movement or the sexual harassment, sexual allegations, sexual assault cases that we see even today. And I made the case that Abraham was 10,000 years ago, and Joseph is his great-grandson. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. And even let's assume that even that generation was 1,000 years apart. That still leaves us with 9,000 years. So human behavior doesn't really change, and I just found that incredibly fascinating, because we think that we've progressed, we think that we've grown, but we really haven't. We're still the very same thing that we've been since 180,000 years ago when we became Homo sapiens. So that is something worthy of note. So when people say, oh, the Quran is 1,400 years old, or the Bible is 2,000 years old, or the Old Testament is even older, or the Bhagavad Gita came 5,000 years ago, it doesn't apply to today. You can tell those people this example and many other examples. Human beings are governed by very simple forces: lust, greed, power, hunger. Fear, anger, those are emotions. They may not be forces, but they may be intrinsic forces. Very few forces. Only the toys slightly change, but the motivations are exactly the same. That is why we get books like this, which teach us faith, trust, growth, divinity, love, compassion, empathy, sympathy. It teaches us all of those things, because left to our own devices, we might end up eating each other, like we used to a long time ago, but we used to do that. So civilization needs to be civilized to begin with. So I stopped at 34, didn't I? So his Lord answered his invocation and turned away. Verily, he is the all-hearer, all-knower. Yeah, so at this time, the wife of his employer has come out in public and been labeled a molester. Oh, you molested that young man, because it was proven by where the cloth was torn. And then she brought over women from the neighborhood and asked Joseph to walk in, and they ended up cutting their fingers, we know. And then it was said that I will throw him in prison and so forth. And then he was thrown in prison. So I will start here at verse 35. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Then it occurred to them, after they had seen the proofs of his innocence, to imprison him for a time. See, isn't that wonderful? I'm not going to make any comparisons of people today, but many a times, imprisonment is a punitive force, a force used to regulate, and when regulation becomes too strong, it becomes protectionism, it becomes oppression, and it becomes tyranny. So, but the base desire is the same. Do what I tell you to do. If you don't do it, this is what I'm prepared to do. So when Joseph wasn't giving in to her sexual demands, wasn't affected by all these women cutting their fingers and saying, oh, look, I want to fall at your feet. He wasn't doing anything like that. Throw him in prison. Just anything to satisfy her own ego, her own problems, her own desire. Then it occurred to them, I've read the And there entered with him 2 young men in the prison. One of them said, "Verily, I saw myself in a dream pressing wine." Okay. Well, at this time, wine was common. I mean, even in the early days of Islam, wine was still common. The other said, "Verily, I saw myself in a dream carrying bread on my head, and birds were eating thereof." Well, that's an interesting dream. So you're carrying a tray of bread or a basket, and birds are eating it. Inform us of the interpretation of this. Verily, we think you are one of the Muhsinun, doers of good. Now, as we discussed last week, Joseph had this capacity to interpret dreams. Now, that is something that has quite died away in today's society. It's quite disappeared. But when it was present, some people still do it, some people conjecture. But this was a practice, and some people use the term, "Oh, I'm a medium, I'm this, I'm that." I'm not talking about that only. I'm talking about the actual art and knowledge of interpreting a dream. So Joseph hears these 2 dreams. One person is pressing wine, and the other is carrying bread. Before I even read this, I want to think about what it actually means. Wine. Wine can be related to blood. It's just a thought experiment. It's not useful for this exercise, but I'm trying to understand why they couldn't figure it out themselves. So wine could be related to blood, or wine could be related to... Because we don't drink wine when we're thirsty. We drink water when we're thirsty. Wine is more rejoicement, but if it's in a dream, it might mean something negative because of its color. And bread could mean many things. Bread could mean sustenance, but bread could also mean that those birds are picking away at your flesh, because bread is flesh and blood. Interesting. Okay, now let's read. He said, "No food will come to you in wakefulness or in dream as your provision, but I will inform in wakefulness its interpretation before it comes, the food. This is of that which my Lord has taught me." Yep, we know. "Verily, I have abandoned the religion of a people that believe not in God and are disbelievers in the hereafter." That's fine. The Canaanite of Egypt, who are polytheists and used to worship sun and other false deities. We know. This is Joseph's story. Fair enough. "And I have followed the religion of my father Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob," as discussed earlier, "and never could we attribute any partners whosoever to Allah or to God," as I use the term. "This is from the grace of God to us and to mankind. But most men thank not, they neither believe in God nor worship them." Still true. This is a story of a person who lived 9,000 years ago. 8,000, a long time ago, multiple millennia. So try to place him in context. Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a millennium and a half ago. Jesus was 2 millennia ago. Moses was 3-4 millennia ago. This person is 9 millennia ago. Try to think along those lines. Unless I'm mistaken, unless Abraham wasn't part of the Sumerian Empire or he came later, it doesn't seem so. And he's saying that those people still don't thank God. They still don't thank him. They don't believe in him, not worship him. That is the case even today. There are countless people around the world who are benefiting from the bounty of our Lord, but they neither believe in him, nor trust him, nor pray to him until a calamity befalls them of such scale that they have to. That they see no other line except the line that leads to the guy above. "O 2 companions of the prisons, are many different lords better, or God the one, the irresistible?" Ooh, the irresistible. I like how he's placed that. So before Joseph interprets the dreams, I think he's trying to establish, are you also of the same belief as I am? Because I've left that other religion. So we do that today as well. I've seen a lot of Democrats in America who refuse to be friends with Republicans. I've seen liberal political supporters in England who refuse to be friends with conservatives. So there's almost an establishment of shared belief, values, identities, perspectives. So you see that whenever you ask somebody where they're from. So if I see somebody who has olive skin like mine, I would be more inclined to go up to them and say, where are you from? And if they say South Asia, or if they say Middle East, at once a connection is formed. If they say Turkey, I lived in Turkey for 7 years. Pakistan, I was born in Pakistan, so and so forth. So I think in that manner, Joseph is establishing whether we share the same foundation so that we may have a proper conversation and so forth. He is not just interpreting dreams for anyone. You do not worship besides him, but only names which you have named, forged, you and your fathers, for which God has sent down your authority. The command or the judgment is for none but God. He has commanded that you worship none but him, monotheism. That is the true straight religion that most men know not. Now, haven't we heard this before? Last time, not last week, but the week before that, the previous chapter, we're talking about Hud. We're talking about the same story with Noah, the same story with Abraham, the same with Lot, the same with Hud, the same with Saleh, the same with Moses, the same with Jesus, the same with Muhammad. It's the same old story every single time, that there is one God, the straight religion as it says, but you don't accept it. And I've said this multiple times. Left to their own devices, we always end up creating religions with multiple gods. So the Sumerians or the Hindus or the Egyptians or the Romans or the Greeks, they always have a god of fertility, a god of war, a god of money, a god of this, a god of that. But when a messenger comes with a message, there's always one God. And that one God is the culmination of all those other gods. Everything is attributed to him and much more. But it's an interesting dynamic. I'm trying to think of a religion. Maybe Buddhism would be the closest, but I don't know if Buddha was a prophet or not. But Buddhism would be the closest, where one man has created or discovered a religion where there aren't multiple gods. Buddhism would be the only one here where I may explore further. Otherwise, you're worshipping fire, you're worshipping animals, you're worshipping thunder and so many things. So it's very interesting that humans create religions with multiple divinities. So he's trying to establish that, are we of the same religion? Do we believe the same thing? O two companions of the prison, as for one of you, interesting. Now he's going to interpret. He, as a servant, will pour out wine for his Lord, king or master, to drink. As for the other, he will be crucified, and birds will eat from his head. See, I had some idea. Thus is the case judged concerning which you both did inquire. Oh, that is interesting. Pour out wine for his Lord. Why is that a good thing? So maybe somebody who's in prison, to him, that's a huge step up. You're sitting in prison with me, but very soon you'll be pouring out wine from a pitcher or a flask for the king or master, so they drink. And particularly in ancient times, even today, if you're in a position of authority or value, you have to be very careful with what you eat and drink. So the servant who's allowed to pour the drink for the king or the master is a special servant. It's not like somebody who's working out in the field, one of many. This person is an arm's length of the king or the lord or the master. So he's been granted special status. It's not just a waiter in a restaurant who's poured your drink, but even then, the waiter who pours your drink at your table is the waiter who is assigned to your table. Nobody else comes to your table. That waiter keeps pouring and pouring, or waitress. They keep pouring and pouring and pouring. They're assigned to you. They're attached to you. They're the ones who come and speak to you, not the other ones. Those ones. So I think that's what's being said, that very soon you'll have a better life. And for the other one, you will be crucified and birds will eat from your head. My Lord. Oh. That's scary. And he said to the one whom he knew to be saved, the one with one, mention me to your Lord, i.e. your king, so as to get me out of prison. But Satan made him forget to mention it to his Lord. Well done, Satan. Back at it again. Or Satan made Joseph forget remembrance of his Lord as to ask for his help instead of others. So Joseph stayed in prison a few more years. This is interesting. My mom says this all the time, because I always think about people as networking, as you build somebody who can lead you to something else. That's what networking is all about. We don't network just for fun. We network for opportunities. And my mom says, look, you shouldn't think of people as avenues. Think of people as people, and think of God as the only avenue. So don't say, oh, that person is going to help me get this. Say, God will help me get this. That person is only a vessel. That's a very interesting lesson that she keeps teaching me. I have not fully learned it, may I just say. It is something that I still consider, and I have to remind myself, like, look, that person may help me get this, but that person, at the end of the day, is still just a person. The entity who is orchestrating and governing everything is the one and only true God. So my mother reminds me of this, and I think that's being said here, that perhaps Joseph asked the person, hey, when you get here, tell your boss to let me out too, rather than praying directly to God. But these are two interpretations. I love how the Quran tells the story. It suddenly jumps, and the king of Egypt said, verily, I saw in a dream 7 fat cows, whom 7 lean ones were devouring. Whoa! And 7 green ears of corn, and 7 others dry. O notables, explain to me my dream, if it be that you can interpret dreams. My lord, 7 lean cows were eating 7 fat cows. Wow. Ooh, that's a heavy dream. I don't really dream. I rarely have dreams, so it's harder for me to understand this. But let's see if we can interpret. So 7 lean cows and 7 fat cows. It could be that the fat ones have not benefited the king and the lean ones are helping him somehow, or vice versa, that a calamity is about to befall him. The corn one, I really don't know, the green and the dry one. They said, mixed up false dreams, and we are not skilled in the interpretation of dreams. That the man who is released, it happens exactly like God is such a master. The man who is released happened to be there at that very time. It's so interesting how the timing works. Now at length remembered and said, I will tell you its interpretation, so send me forth. And then he said, O Joseph, the man of truth, explain to us the dream of 7 fat cows, whom 7 lean ones were devouring, and of 7 green ears of corn and 7 others dry, that I may return to the people, that they may know. It's very interesting. Imagine being Joseph. He's sitting in his prison cell, just looking outside, and suddenly somebody turns up. Hi, so I have this wonderful dream. Could you please interpret it for me? It's very interesting. If somebody comes to you today, all you do is guess. Like in Turkey, we have this thing called the fal, which is supposed to be method of telling somebody's fortune. You drink a cup of Turkish coffee and then you flip it upside down, and then after a while you see it and you say, oh, I see a cloud coming, and the cloud means this. Oh, I see a bird, it means this. But that's all conjecture. There's no science behind it. But imagine being that person. Everybody meets you on the street. Hi, I had a dream last night. What does this mean? And you're like, oh, well, it means this. So you end up writing a book or something because there's so many dreams happening. So it's interesting. You just went to Joseph and said, tell me what this dream means so I can tell them. And of course, Joseph knows. Joseph said, for 7 consecutive years, you shall sow as usual, and that the harvest which you reap, you shall leave it in the heirs, all except a little of it which you may eat. Wow. So those who are not familiar with farming, those who are not familiar with how fields are run and how crops are grown, Google it, because I don't want to spend time today to explain that. But this is not good news. Then will come after that 7 hard years, which will devour what you have laid by in advance for them. Oh, I saw that coming. All except a little of that which you have guarded. Oh. So bad times are in the offing. Wow. That's not good. Then thereafter will come a year in which people will have abundant rain, and in which they will press wine and oil. Okay, wine and oil, perhaps contextually, they're useful. No, I'm not satisfied with this yet. Which you reap, you shall leave it in the heirs, all except a little of it which you may eat. So he's counseling them not to take all the food, but to leave it as it is, not to consume all the food. Don't consume it knowing that something bad is going to happen for the next 7 years, and then a year where there'll be a lot of rain. 7 years is a long period of time. How can one accept that? 7 years is a long period of time, even for somebody who is well versed in delayed gratification. Delayed gratification, you push your gratification forward and you face the hardship today, but 7 years is a while. And the king said, bring him to me. But when the messenger came to him, Joseph said, "Return to your lord and ask him, what happened to the women who cut their hands? Surely my lord is well aware of the plot." Oh, so maybe it's the same king as who employed him. Ah, interesting. The king said to the women, "What was your affair when you did seek to seduce Joseph?" So those women were also trying to seduce Joseph. The women said, "God forbid. No evil know we against him." The wife of Al-Aziz said, "Now the truth is manifest to all. It was I who sought to seduce him, and he is surely of the truthful." How wonderful, wife of Al-Aziz. How honest of you. So thank you so much for saying that. Even if this happens today, the person in question, man or woman, would deny it, employ lawyers, throw money at it, and find any way to get through. But I applaud you for at least accepting it. Even that is more than what others would do. So she said, "The truth is manifest to all. It was I who sought to seduce him, and he is surely of the truthful." Then Joseph said, "I asked for this inquiry in order that he may know that I betrayed him not in his absence, and verily God guides not the plot of the betrayers." And in this one, it says in the footnote, narrated by Ibn Umar, the Prophet said, "For every betrayer, a flag will be raised on the day of resurrection. It will be announced publicly. This is the betrayal of so-and-so, the son of so-and-so." This is from Sahih al-Bukhari 86177. Wow. Oh, that's not good. That's not good. See, it's one thing to be punished. The other is to be publicly humiliated. Oh, that's quite an important thing. Now, I'm curious. Why? So the king calls Joseph because the interpretation is something that the king is afraid of. The king calls Joseph, and Joseph says, "No, before I go make my case clear so that I may come out with a clear slate. So ask the women who tried to seduce me or whatever, ask them to make my case clear," and they did. And then the wife did, and only then is Joseph prepared to come out because he wants to show that he has not betrayed. Betrayal is a big thing in all religions. Islam, no, of course. Of course. So today, when we talk about betrayal, we might think of infidelity, marital or in a relationship, cheating on your partner. We consider that betrayal of trust. But that's not the only betrayal. There are many betrayals. This a clear example. And the deepest and hardest ones are betrayals of one's own self. We all have an opinion of ourselves. We all trust ourselves. If we betray ourselves, that is something we can't reconcile over a long period of time. We can betray God, and God doesn't punish us immediately. That does happen all the time. We're all doing it all the time. And that we must repent for. But betrayal of self is something that can severely damage the human psyche. "And I free not myself from the blame. Verily the human self is inclined to evil, except when my Lord bestows his mercy upon whom he wills. Verily my Lord is oft forgiving, most merciful." So as mentioned last week, Joseph is saying, because last week he said, in the previous section, he said, "Oh my Lord, protect me because I will succumb to these beautiful women. I will be seduced. Please protect me." Remember, this is the dialogue. This is the idea that he was putting forward. Joseph, the best looking man on the planet, the most attractive, the beautiful man, son of Jacob, son of Isaac, son of Abraham. He has divine lineage, not divine lineage, but prophetic lineage in him. All of that, and even he is saying, "Save me because I might get seduced." So that's what he's saying. The human self is inclined to evil. So he's not saying I'm blameless. He's saying my Lord protected me. Oh, what a fantastic guy. He's not saying, well, it was my self-control and I just held myself back and that's how I was able to fend off all these other ladies. He didn't say any of that. He said, "It's thanks to my Lord that I was able to do so." What an incredible man. And the king said, "Bring him to me that I may attach him to my person." Oh, interesting. Then when attach him to my person, it may be a form of affection. Then when he spoke to him, he said, "Verily this day you are with us, high in rank and fully trusted." This is a pendulum swing, isn't it? It goes left and right. Yesterday, you're in prison, and today you're sitting next to the king of the realm, and the king is singing your praises. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that wonderful? That's how life goes up and down all the time. Joseph said, "Set me over the storehouses of the land. I will indeed guard them with full knowledge as a minister of finance in Egypt." Now, why is he doing that? I think it has something to do with the dream. And that dream was shown to that very king, so that king can ask for an interpretation, and the interpretation can lead to Joseph, and Joseph can come and see him after clearing his record and look after the grain and the food, so that when the drought comes, they have some supplies. It's so beautifully tied within each other. It's so beautifully done. Only God can do it this way. I couldn't plan like this. Thus did we give full authority to Joseph in the land to take possession therein. When or where he likes, we bestow of our mercy on him, on whom we will, and we make not to be lost the reward of al-Muhsinin, the good doers. This will be discussed in a lot more detail when I cover chapter 2, but this is the main story, isn't it? So Joseph was given dominion and as minister of finance in Egypt. And verily the reward of the hereafter is better for those who believe and used to fear God and keep their duty to him by abstaining from all kinds of sins and evil deeds, and by performing all kinds of righteous good deeds. I love when God does this. I love it because verse 57 applies to Muhammad. Here, God is telling the story of Joseph to Muhammad through his revelation. And in there are certain verses which Muhammad can apply to all the people of Mecca and say, well, you know the bad deeds and the good deeds, and this will be punished and this will be rewarded. And then they'll say, where did you hear that? Well, let me tell you the story of Joseph. Like Muhammad has done with the story of Moses, the story of Noah, the story of Abraham, the story of Hud, Saleh, the story of Lot, the story of Adam. These are tools God is arming Muhammad with. So the prophet is becoming stronger and clearer because the stories are becoming stronger and clearer. And Joseph's brethren came and they entered unto him, and he recognized them, but they recognized him not. Now, you have to watch Joseph, King of Dreams. I've said this before. It's one of the best portrayals of Joseph by DreamWorks. If I'm not mistaken, it's DreamWorks. Joseph, King of Dreams is called Prince of Egypt 2, but forget the first title. Prince of Egypt is about Moses. Joseph, King of Dreams is about Joseph. You have to watch it because the brothers who threw him in the well, who abandoned him, now are present in his court. And he saw them and recognized them, but they didn't. And one might say, well, how could they not recognize him? He is their brother. Well, do you believe that Lois Lane doesn't recognize Superman when he's Clark Kent? Right? So there's a thing in the manner of a confirmation bias. So confirmation bias. I wouldn't, if I were one of his older brothers, I wouldn't really expect Joseph to be at such a high political position. So even if I saw somebody who looked like him, my mind wouldn't make the connection. Similarly, Lois and everybody at the Daily Planet in DC Comics sees Superman flying and saving the world, and then they see a similar looking fellow who's all sheepish and glasses and whatever. You'd never say, oh yeah, maybe he's Superman. You don't make the connection. The mind doesn't take the leap. So, but Joseph knew. He recognized his brothers, but they didn't. So they came asking for something, and when he had furnished them with their provisions according to their need, he said, bring me a brother of yours from your father. He meant Benjamin, the younger one, who also invariably became a prophet. See you not that I give full measure, and that I am the best of the hosts, but if you bring him not to me, there shall be no measure of corn for you with me, nor shall you come near me. Ooh. So he is using his leverage, which we do even today, which every human being does. He's using his leverage to require that his younger brother joins him. It's very interesting. Something is special about that younger brother. So that's why he's asked to be brought. And the other brothers are like, oh, what? Why is he asking for the younger brother? They said, we shall try to get permission for him from his father, and verily we shall do it. Father Jacob. And Joseph told his servants to put their money with which they had bought the corn into their bags, so that they might know it when they go back to the people, in order they might come again. Understandable. It's just a technique of the time. So when they returned to their father, they said, "Oh, our father, no more measure of grain shall we get unless we take our brother. So send our brother with us, and we shall get our measure, and truly we will guard him." Truly we will guard him. I've heard that before. Did you say the same thing with Joseph a while ago? He said, "Can I entrust him to you except as I entrusted his brother Joseph to you aforetime?" But God is the best to guard, and he is the most merciful of those who show mercy. I mean, he's Jacob. Jacob, son of Isaac, grandson of Abraham, father of Joseph. He's a prophet. He is the prophet, of course. Of course he knows what's happening. Of course he knows. Even when they took Joseph with them and abandoned him, Jacob knew even then, and he was telling himself to be patient, because that is God's path for Joseph. And Jacob, knowing this, accepted it as it is. It's very hard for a father to accept this. It's very hard. But Jacob was given foresight by God, so he was able to do so. But now he feels the same way about Benjamin, and he has to make the brothers realize, like, look, you took the last boy away as well. And what did you do to him? You didn't bring him back. You're going to do the same with this one. And when they opened their bags, they found their money had been returned to them. They said, "Oh, our father, what more can we desire? This, our money has been returned to us, so we shall get more food for our family, and we shall guard our brother and add one more measure of a camel's load." This quantity is easy for the king to give. So with the food and the grain and the corn, the money was put back in. I'm gesturing, that's how the money was put back in. So the money was put back in, and they saw, oh, wow, so we got our food for free, basically. It's like you go pay at McDonald's and they give you cash back with the food. Jacob said, "I will not send him with you until you swear a solemn oath to me in God's name that you will bring him back to me unless you are yourself surrounded by enemies." And when they had sworn this solemn oath, he said, "God is the witness to what we have said." He's putting them in a position. But I wouldn't trust these sons. But Jacob knows what's happening. He has foresight. I wouldn't trust these sons as far as I could throw them. You've screwed up once before. How can I trust you again? That would be my response, to be very frank. And he said, "O my sons, do not enter by one gate, but enter by different gates, and I cannot avail you against God at all. Verily the decision rests only with God. In him I put my trust, and let all those that trust put their trust in him." Now, there's a very, very large footnote which I'm going to read about this. And I'm going to stop here at verse 67. I'm wondering if it can be shown here. No, it's too much. So no, I won't show it like this. What I'll do is I'll read it here. So Jacob has counseled his sons to do something, like enter with different gates. And I'm going to read what it says here. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, God's messenger said, 70,000 people of my followers will enter paradise without account. And there are those who do not practice al-ruqya. And it says for al-ruqya, see the glossary. Now I have to see the glossary to know exactly what it means. There we go. Give me a minute. It's not my first language. You have to be kind. Ruqya. Here we go. Divine speech recited as a means of curing disease. It is a kind of treatment. Oh, interesting. To recite Surah Al-Fatiha or any other surah of the Quran and then blow one's breath with saliva over a sick person's body. I didn't know this was a religious practice. Wow. So, for the uninitiated, let me tell you what this word means. Ar-ruqya. When we are unwell, I've noticed this in Pakistan, in Turkey, in every Muslim country. I've noticed this in Hinduism too. So you take a part of the Quran, one of the most important chapters, you recite it and you go, you blow it over the person's head and you just, I do it all the time. When I leave home, I recite Ayatul Kursi, which is the chair, which we'll recite later. And I go, as if that means something, but that's the thing that's being discussed right now. So it is being said here The 70,000 people of my followers will enter paradise without account, and there are those who do not practice al-ruqya and do not see an evil omen in things and put their trust in the Lord. Interesting. So there are people who believe in omens. There are people who don't put their trust in God and who are always superstitious. Those people who do not succumb to these weaknesses in human beings will enter heaven. That's what's being said without account. And narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, an Israeli man asked another Israeli to lend him 1,000 dinars. Lots of money at that time. The second man required witnesses. Of course. Because I could lend you money and you could say, you never gave me anything. The former replied, God is sufficient as a witness. The second said, I want surety. The former said, God is sufficient as a surety. The second said, you are right, and lent him the money for a certain period. The debtor went across the sea. When he finished his job, he searched for a conveyance so that he might reach in time for the repayment of the debt, but he could not find any. All part of God's plan. So he took a piece of wood and made a hole in it, inserted in it 1,000 dinars, and a letter to the lender, and then closed, sealed the hole tightly. We've heard of messages in a bottle, but to send money in a bottle, that's quite interesting. I find that very interesting. You put all your money in the bottle. Wow. But see, that's the trust you have in God, because then he took the piece of wood to the sea and said, oh God, you know well that I took a loan of 1,000 dinars from so-and-so. He demanded a surety from me, but I told him that God's guarantee was sufficient, and he accepted your guarantee. He then asked for a witness, and I told him that God was sufficient as a witness, and he accepted you as a witness. Oh, my heart's breaking. Wow. No doubt I have tried hard to find a conveyance so that I could pay his money back, but could not find. So I hand over this money to you. Wow. So this is a next level of faith. I don't have this amount of faith. Wow. I didn't know that. Saying that, he threw the piece of wood into the sea till it went out far into it, and then he went away. Meanwhile, he started searching for a conveyance in order to reach the creditor's country. One day, the lender came out of his house to see whether a ship had arrived bringing his money, and all of a sudden, he saw the piece of wood in which his money had been deposited. He took it home to use for fire. When he saw it, he found his money and the letter inside it. Shortly after that, the debtor came back, bringing 1,000 dinars to him and said, by God, I had been trying hard to get a boat so that I could bring you your money, but failed to get one before the one I have come by. So the money reached him before the debtor could even come back. My Lord. The lender asked, have you sent something to me? The debtor replied, I've told you I could not get a boat other than the one I have come by. The lender said, God has delivered on your behalf the money you sent in the piece of wood, so you may keep your 1,000 dinars and depart guided on the right path. My word. Sahih al-Bukhari 3229. Wow. Trust in God. Tawakkaltu ala Allah is a term that we use, and we've discussed this before. My God, this is insane. Yeah, I'm stopping here because it's verse 67 and had a large footnote at the end. But this is incredible. This is really incredible. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I have enough confidence to be able to do this. So you agree with the other person, God is my witness, and God is sufficient for surety. And then when you're unable with means of travel, you say to God, look, you are my witness, this is what I'm doing. And then do so. We've lost this faith. We've lost it, haven't we? We have to find ways to get it back. We've really lost it, because I know there are certain prayers, and I'm not sharing them with the wider public, but there are certain prayers which I pray like I'm a child. I scream, I cry, I imagine doing this as we've seen millions of men do through thousands of years ago. And I beseech God. And while I was at God's house in Mecca, I was doing the exact same thing. Everyone was touching the Kaaba and everybody was crying like a child. I'm telling you, it was the most powerful experience of my life. And those prayers end up coming true. When you leave all in God's hand, of course, you must do what is required of you. But you're like, you have to make this work. I don't know how you're going to do it, but I bore you as my witness. You have to make this work. And look, the money reached that man. It's insane. That's how divinity works. That's how God works. But anyway, I'm going to stop here at the cliffhanger of Joseph's story. And next week we will start at verse 68 and go till verse 111, and we'll wrap this up. But thank you anyway for joining me today for another session of Finding God. I shall see you next week. Take care. Have a wonderful